Okay. The reason that we're filming this is because our coach, we have a coach, wants to hear us. Okay. All right, so welcome to the Best Day Ever Tour. Today we are going to share our mission with you. And the first thing we're going to do is we usually typically introduce each other and how we're affiliated with the school, but all of us know how we're affiliated with the school, so we'll just move on. And that's always interesting too, because people come from different backgrounds. And then there's typically an ambassador who welcomes you and then introduces Mrs. Hewitt. And the ambassador will say that, she'll say that I will call, Roxanne Miller will call you after it's done. Thank you for coming to the Best Day Ever. We want to share the mission with you. Now this is Mrs. Hewitt, our head of school. You're going to hear from her about how she's starting the school.
Well, thank you for coming. With every vision of a school, there's a story, and mine starts with my first son. The child was born with a heart condition and needed services at 2.5 years old when I was living in New York. Basically just said, well, it's time to go to school and get him some services, and took him around lots of places in the metropolitan area and could not find a school to service him. And we went school to school, and being in that area, I thought it'd be no problem, but after many schools, I just kept hearing the same thing. I'm sorry, we don't take those children. I wondered what those children meant, but as it became more and more apparent, schools just saw that this is the type of child that they can't service or don't want, so they just kept saying, we don't take those children. Finally, after a long search, came to a little school at the end of the island who said, you know what? We'll give it a try. So they did take him, and they stayed there for a couple of years, and I remember thinking, those children. And I remember clearly stating, if I ever ran a school, I'd take those children. Not exactly knowing that was in the future, but here we are today. But that's only part of the story. The rest is kind of history. From there, being in New York and moving and coming out here, through a lot of twists and turns, we found ourselves in the middle of Front Royal. My husband and I, and now we have 3 children. And immediately saw, being in this community while we were visiting friends, that this would be a great place to raise our family. So we decided that we were going to plant here and have our life. And as it turned out, we were at that point offered to run a school. I had just finished all my K-12 education and all my special education, and thought, well, this is good timing. So immediately at that point, we knew that, at least for me, knowing where my son had come from, that we were going to start the school with a real strong vision for approach. That approach was going to be very important. That we weren't just going to serve those children, we were going to serve all children. And in serving all children, we really needed to focus on the right approach. That's how I felt. So through lots of studying and remembering the scripture of Jeremiah 29 that says, I know the plans I have for you, and they're plans of hope and not to harm. I immediately started researching and doing things on what approach is used in schools. And it took me right to the National Institute for Learning Development. In 2008, I got connected with this study where they were using cognitive therapy and cognitive learning. And this was new. And research was showing that understanding how the brain and understanding a child and how they cognitively learn, that this approach was being quite effective. So we immediately, I embraced in it, and we started doing research and became partners with NILD and started using that approach for our professional development with all the teachers. And our teachers would get several hours of certification in NILD and FIE, and the cognitive approach for professional development was now being put in. And of course, it also supported, we also believe in the classical approach, and it supported that. So professional development was a big key. We were now a school that started as a small school, growing into a K-12 school, and a classically based school that we were seeing develop quickly. And we knew then we also had to think about our emphasis and our mission and message, which basically was that we were going to service children, all children, and make sure they hit their God-given potential, and make sure that they are students that turn out to be the best version of themselves, and serving not just Warren County, but many counties around us. So it was exciting through this professional development and this idea we were now moving into, so who are we? There are three ways that Front Row Christian services their children, and it's education, formation, and inclusion. These are kind of our areas of study. And of course, education is, simply put, as you hear often, academic education and excellence. We immediately knew that we had to do something different. In our education, our graduation class that just did last year was graduated with $850,000 worth of scholarships, and we're accepted to 22 universities. Our students are involved in strong and rigorous academics here, but also are part of a dual enrollment program in which they can be in-house or out-house to get further studies. And we were seeing that work with this type of a graduating class, and seeing that the universities and they were getting accepted. We knew the professional development was now showing through in the education through this academic excellence, and we knew the students were succeeding and getting accepted to the colleges they wanted to go to. At this point, from there, we were looking at the area of formation. Education is an easy word to understand. Formation has to do with purpose. And it's the heart of FRCS is to make sure that the child's purpose is found and that they become the best version of themselves. We knew that using this professional development and the education approach that we now had to fulfill that inner purpose in them. And for us, it was through community service. We expect 100 hours before graduation, and the students are expected to go on a one-week missions trip and give back. That community service aspect of the formation has been incredible. It helps us to service our children, and it helps us to help them see to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. It was obvious that the opportunity for community service changed a lot of who we were. So much so that a class was developed through this particular service called Community and Career, in which the students actually have a service day every week and go out and do lots of service projects to serve that neighbor. And then there's the area, of course, of inclusion. Knowing that inclusion was going to be part of the school, we service about 10%. And while 10% of the students are getting this inclusive, 90% are getting the value of being part of that program. And we see every day the mentorship that goes on. We know that the students here in the inclusion and in this program are feeling accepted and belonging. And we also knew to keep an inclusion program in the school that we would have to be academically pretty strong. That we would have to show that we weren't going to substitute, we were going to service all the children and make sure that each one was getting what they needed. And in the area of inclusion, it has been a mediation of belonging, and it's worked well. There's many therapists that are working with the students, therapists that have been trained in Europe, and therapists that are trained throughout this NILD approach. And not only do we have therapy one-on-one, we're also using mediation within the classrooms for the students. So our inclusion program is running well and supporting our school well. So the vision of FRCS goes further. Right now, where space is an issue, which you'll probably see as you tour, we have a vision to continue to grow our program. We have an incredible performing arts program. We've grown it for the last 9 years now. And last program, we had over hundreds of people coming to our performances. And we want to see that develop and continue to grow. We have a vision to continue getting more therapists trained and making sure that that one-on-one therapy can happen on the cognitive level, as well as keeping our teachers trained in the professional development that they're doing right now through this cognitive therapy. We have lots of vision to make sure that we're going to have the space we need to develop who we are, so that we can have our independent learners. And that's a goal of who we are, is that all of our students become independent learners. And room, of course, is an issue, but it's much deeper. It's much more about who we are and being able to service each child. And it's been known, and you've heard, that Front Row Christian School is the best kept secret in Warren County. And it's our vision to be the best valuable choice in Warren County, and that secret to be God. So I thank you for coming today. You're going to have a wonderful tour that's going to tell you just exactly what each bucket is and how it elaborates to who we are. But that's just a touch in Front Row Christian School and its history. Thank you.